This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
So, the first thing we need to do every day when we're living out for the rest of our life, celebrate God's victories. The second thing is openly live out your commitment. The third thing is live with integrity and honesty. Live with integrity and honesty. John chapter 12 verses 4 through 6 is the story of Judas Iscariot saying, now wait a minute. Why are we taking this money? Why are we taking this perfume? And that was 300 denarii. We could have helped the poor with that. Now, if you were to ask a number of people to define Judas' character, in other words, tell me about Judas. What kind of person was Judas? What do you think about Judas? Not what he did, but his character. Tell me about his character. You would probably find that most of the descriptions generally fall into a lack of integrity and a lack of honesty. Judas was, now how this happened, I don't know, but he was the treasurer of the group. And there were a few things that are very, very clear in this passage as we study about Judas in this incident. One of those things is that Jesus and the disciples used the money that was given to them to meet needs, especially the needs of the poor. Now, there is no evidence that Jesus or the disciples ever asked for money. They weren't Baptists. And there's no evidence that they were out there asking for money. But the fact that they had to have somebody handle the finances indicates that people trusted them and gave for the purpose of their ministry. And we know that people did give openly and willingly. Luke chapter 8 verses 1 through 3 says, soon afterward he went on through cities and villages proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others, who provided for them out of their means. So people did give. They gave generously. And the early church carried out that same heart. In Acts chapter 2, it says that they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. It was the way they operated. It was about meeting needs. And by the way, I am a strong, and you've heard me say this over and over again, I am a strong believer that we have to trust God for our finances. And when we start taking those things in our own hands and say, this is how I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to settle it, not only in our own life, but even in the life of the church, we're out of bounds. We have to trust God for that. He directs us. He leads us. He shows us what it is that we're supposed to do. He tells us how we're to live out our lives and how to handle those issues in our lives. And one of the key things that we are to be doing in our lives is living out our ministry of meeting needs. But we have to do it with integrity and with honesty. It all comes back to what you've heard me say before. God's will done God's way never lacks for God's provision. God's will done God's way never lacks for God's provision. God's will done God's way never lacks for God's provision. We need to learn that. We need to trust that. We need to focus on that. Now, while Jesus certainly understood what was going on with Judas, the disciples apparently didn't figure it out until later. Bottom line is this: Judas was a thief. And while pretending to care about the ministry of Jesus and the disciples, taking care of the poor, he was actually stealing from them. Money was obviously the center of his life. So much so that it became the impetus to betray Jesus and turn him over to the Jewish authorities. He settled for 30 pieces of silver, which was the amount one would have to pay to purchase a slave. He sold Jesus for the price of a slave. Because money was the center of his life. It was really important to him. He was a thief. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires. Notice that. Many senseless and harmful. Oh, this isn't really all that harmful. This isn't really a big deal. Then it's the senseless category. But it's senseless and harmful. When we want to get rich, when becoming rich becomes the focus of our lives, we fall into senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Now, you know that I believe every family ought to have a second job, a side job, a business. I just do. I just think that it's even if you have a job, you have an employer, and you have something going on, great, that's terrific. You really need to be developing a second business, a side business, because you never know when you're going to lose your employment. And if you've got something going on, then at least you've got something that you can focus on and begin developing and building and growing. Now, it's not to get rich. It's to provide some stability and some courage in your life. If I hadn't have done that in my life when I lost my job, we'd have been in bad trouble. I just really believe that this is what we're supposed to do. I think the Bible encourages being wise, and that's a good way to be wise. So I would encourage you to develop a second job, but not to get rich. Be careful where your motivation comes from. It's really kind of a stark contrast, though, isn't it? A stark contrast between the secret selfishness of Judas and the open sacrifice of Mary. Isn't that interesting? Here is Judas, who's being secretive and manipulative, and here's Mary, who's being very open, seeking. Which one do you think had integrity? Which one was honest? Judas put a greater value on worldly things, and Mary put a greater value on eternal things. Interestingly, Judas' comment and attitudes were contagious. After all, 300 denarii was a lot of money. It was about a year's worth of income, by the way. The normal pay scale was a denarii a day that you worked. And so 300 denarii was about a year's worth of income. And so they didn't have banks in those days. And so people would save their money, and they would save their money by investing it. And expensive perfume was considered a good investment. You could sell expensive perfume. And so the disciples knew that this perfume, this pure nard, was expensive. They knew what it was worth because everybody did. That's what they did. They take their money and they would invest it in things that they knew they could liquidate. And so they knew what it was worth. And so Mark 14, which is also talking about this same story, Mark 14, although it doesn't mention Lazarus, Mark 14 says, there were some, this isn't necessarily disciples, by the way, this is people that were around. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And they scolded her. Your attitude and behavior influences others, even if they don't know what your intent is. Your attitude and your behavior influences other people. It may be one other person, maybe two or three other people, maybe several people. It's basically mass hysteria. We're victims of that. I don't know why it is, but as humans, we're victims of that. When I was in college, which was well over a decade, I was taking a psychology course. Why I took a psychology course, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's what messed me up. But I was in this psychology course, and the thing that we were studying was about mass hysteria, how people are influenced by other people, and we always have an influence on other people around us, whether or not they understand our intent. We have a significant influence on other people around us. So my buddy and I thought it would be kind of cool to do our own little scientific research, and we decided, let's see if we can get people to do something that they normally wouldn't do. Okay, what do you think we should do? Let's cluck. So we started clucking. And we'd be walking along and cluck, and then we'd just be talking along, cluck. And you'd be talking around, you see somebody go cluck, cluck, and the other person would answer cluck, and you would just do that. We were just, listen, we were bored in school, but we started clucking. didn't say anything, didn't explain anything, and people would say, why are you clucking? Just clucking. Cluck, just clucking. It was... This is early in the week. Do you know that by the end of the week, you could go down to the student union and you could hear people clucking all over the student union? Nobody knew why they were doing it. They just were. They were clucking. That's kind of the new thing now. It's clucking. Your actions have an influence on people, whether they know what the intent is or not. Your behavior and your actions influence other people. So act with integrity and with honesty. That's the greatest way to influence people. Make no mistake about it, Judas was a snake, and his actions influenced other people. And the disciples, thinking that he was proposing a noble cause, and the other people around there, maybe some of the disciples, I don't know if it was all of the disciples, the Bible doesn't really say, but the people around him were influenced by his, and not even understanding his intent, they took up the banner. They took up the cause. Just think what integrity, what influence true integrity and honesty would have had on others. Think what integrity and honesty. If you act with integrity and honesty, think of the influence that you'll have on other people. Your integrity is one of the ways that God looks at you. Psalm 7 verse 8 says, "The Lord judges the people. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to the integrity that is in me." Psalm 26 verse 8 through 12, "O Lord, I love the habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells. Do not sweep my soul away with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men, in whose hands are evil devices, and whose right hands are full of bribes. But as for me, I shall walk in my integrity." Psalm 41 verses 11 and 12, "By this I know that you delight in me. My enemy will not shout in triumph over me, but you have upheld me because of my integrity." We need to be people of integrity. Integrity and honesty.
On behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.